If my child is itchy, does that mean they have too much histamine?
Okay, so histamine, I know this is a common question, so let's dive a little deeper here. So histamine is a substance that is released from specialized cells called mast cells when they're triggered, which is often part of an allergic immune response. And I want to point out too that allergies and eczema are two different health problems. So the inflammation that allergies cause can trigger rashes and flares. And most with eczema do not actually have true food allergies or environmental allergies, but those with eczema are at greater risk for both. So back to histamine and mast cells. So mast cells are triggered as part of the body's normal response to injury, as well as like that hypersensitivity or allergic reactions. The mast cells store and release a number of chemicals. Histamine is just one of them. And histamine is responsible for many of the symptoms that people with allergies actually get. With anaphylaxis, histamine concentrations in the blood, for example, increase really fast. So they rise within 10 minutes of the start of symptoms and they return to normal, typically in about 30 to 60 minutes. So these are immediate reactions. And so this is typically what you would expect to see with a histamine reaction, is that it's going to be immediate. And I know a lot of folks are concerned about something called mast cell activation. So this, along with mastocytosis, are actually really rare conditions and most often are not what's happening with your child. These conditions are abnormal and inappropriate increases in mast cell proliferation versus heightened responses. And so just because your child is itchy and has allergies, it does not mean that they have either of those conditions. And back to anaphylaxis for a minute. So that is typically diagnosed clinically based on symptoms. And symptoms that you should be looking out for are difficulty breathing or wheezing, hives. So not necessarily an eczema rash, but hives are more typical of an allergic reaction. There might be swelling of the face, the tongue, the throat. These are the types of reactions that can be life-threatening. So in addition to allergic reactions, histamine can play a role in normal, healthy inflammatory processes. It stimulates stomach acid secretion. It acts as a neurotransmitter. It dilates blood vessels, which helps fluids move through the blood vessel walls. And it's also really important for smooth muscle contraction. So the intestines, the lungs, and the heart rate. And so we need histamine. Then the body makes it for all of these purposes. It's also, again, an important part of a normal, healthy immune response. So trying to lower it unnecessarily can cause a lot of problems as well. In some people, histamine-related symptoms can develop after eating histamine-rich foods, and histamine can be found in a variety of foods. While I don't recommend elimination diets in my practice, if you can identify that your child does react to a food, sure, it makes sense to keep it out while working on the root cause of the problem. And so if your child is sensitive to histamine-rich foods and they're eating a lot of certain ones, you can lower levels of those in the diet to see if that helps. Something else important to understand is that gut microbes, so certain bacteria, can make histamine. And I really find in my clinical practice that a primary reason for histamine issues really is that gut dysbiosis and overgrowth of bacteria in the gut that can increase levels of histamine. And it's not that people can't break it down. Like a lot of people will start supplementing with DAO, for example, to try to help, which I haven't seen help or solve the problem. But the problem really is that their systems are just so overwhelmed and become a histamine factory from all the histamine that's being made in the body. So, and especially little bodies, they're not as effective at clearing things out, so they can become more easily overwhelmed. And so another thing to know about histamine too is that it's not typically what's causing the itch when there's eczema. So inflammation can trigger nerves that transmit itch signals to the brain. This is called proprioceptive itch. So it's an itch that starts in the peripheral nerves in the skin, and that can be caused by an allergic reaction, but it also can be caused by inflammation or skin dryness or skin damage. So if antihistamines aren't helping get rid of the itch for your child, it's more likely that something like this is happening. And again, remember too, that a major source of the itch can also be the toxins from the dysbiotic gut microbes. So again, if antihistamines aren't helping, exploring what's happening in your child's gut is definitely a strategy to explore as well.